February 26, 1945, Elldorf, Germany. A German Tiger I tank commander spots an unfamiliar silhouette through his periscope. It's clearly American. The white star gives it away. But the profile is different, heavier, lower, more menacing than the Shermans he's grown accustomed to hunting. He's not concerned. For years, German tankers have dominated American armor. The Sherman is a death trap, easily penetrated by the Tiger's 88mm gun. This new tank, whatever it is probably just another variant. Another target. He orders his gunner to engage. The American tank fires first. The 90mm armor-piercing round screams across the gap at 2,800 feet per second. It punches through the Tiger's frontal armor like tissue paper. The Tiger erupts in flames. The crew dies instantly. The American tank is an M26 Pershing. The German commander's last mistake was underestimating it. For decades, we've heard about German tank superiority in World War II. The Tiger, the Panther, the fearsome 88mm gun that dominated battlefields across Europe. We've heard how American Shermans were outclassed, outgunned and sacrificed in droves to stop German armor. But there's another story, a story about a gun that German intelligence completely misread, a weapon that shattered the myth of German armored invincibility, and a fatal ignorance that cost elite Panzer crews their lives. This is the story of the Pershing's 90mm gun, the weapon Tiger tankers should have feared, but didn't until it was too late. For years, American tank crews had been dying in Shermans, not because they lacked courage, not because they lacked skill, but because they were outgunned. The numbers tell a brutal story. The standard Sherman carried a 75mm gun, adequate against early German tanks, completely inadequate against the Tiger I or Panther. To penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor, a Sherman needed to get within 500 yards and hit a weak spot. The Tiger could kill a Sherman from 2,000 yards, anywhere on the hull. The result? American tank doctrine evolved around a grim reality. It takes 5 Shermans to kill 1 Tiger. Maybe more. The first 4 Shermans die drawing fire and maneuvering for position. The 5th, if lucky, gets a side or rear shot. This wasn't doctrine anyone was proud of, but it was the reality American tankers faced from North Africa through France. By late 1944, the Sherman's inadequacy was undeniable. Tankers were terrified of encountering German heavy armor. Some crews welded extra armor plates onto their Shermans, often from destroyed German tanks. It rarely helped. The Sherman's armor was too thin and its gun too weak. The upgraded Sherman, the M4A3E8 with the 76mm high-velocity gun, was better. It could penetrate a Panther's side armor at reasonable ranges. But against a Tiger, still inadequate for frontal engagements. American tankers developed a reputation problem. They weren't seen as elite, they were seen as brave but doomed. German tankers, by contrast, had swagger. The Tiger I was considered nearly invulnerable. The Panther was feared across every front. German armor doctrine emphasized quality over quantity, and it seemed to be working. This reputation extended to intelligence assessments. When German reconnaissance units first reported a new American heavy tank in early 1945, the reports were filed with minimal concern. Another American tank? Probably just a heavier Sherman variant. Maybe better armor. But the gun? Likely the same inadequate American guns they'd been facing for years. This assumption would prove catastrophic. German intelligence made a fatal error. They assumed American tank development followed the same incremental path as their previous designs. They assumed American guns would remain underpowered. They assumed they still held a decisive technological advantage. They were wrong on every count. The M26 Pershing wasn't an evolution of the Sherman, it was a revolution. And its 90mm gun wasn't just better than the Sherman's gun. It was comparable, and in some ways superior, to the German 88mm gun that had dominated European battlefields. But German tankers didn't know this yet, and their ignorance would kill them. Let's talk about the weapon German intelligence completely misread, the 90mm M3 gun. This wasn't new technology. The 90mm anti-aircraft gun had been in US service since 1940, primarily as an anti-aircraft weapon. But mounting it on a tank required solving significant engineering challenges. The recoil was massive, the gun was heavy, the turret needed to be completely redesigned. By 1944, American engineers had solved these problems. The result was the 90mm M3 tank gun, mounted on the M26 Pershing. The performance specifications should have terrified German ordnance experts had they bothered to investigate. The 90mm M3 firing standard M82 armor-piercing capped ballistic cap rounds achieved a muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second. At 1,000 yards, it could penetrate 120 millimeters of armor at 30 degrees angle. At 500 yards, 140 millimeters. Let's put that in context. The Tiger Wien's frontal armor was 100 millimeters thick. The Panther's frontal armor was 80 millimeters sloped at 55 degrees, providing equivalent protection to about 140 millimeters of vertical armor. The 90mm M3 could penetrate both, frontally, at combat ranges. Even more devastating was the M304 hypervelocity armor-piercing round, HVAP for short. This tungsten core projectile achieved a muzzle velocity of 3,300 feet per second. At 1,000 yards, it could penetrate 170 millimeters of armor. There was no German tank in service that could withstand an HVAP round frontally at combat ranges. Not the Tiger I, not the Panther, not even the Tiger II. Compare this to the German 88mm KWK-36 gun on the Tiger Y. Firing standard armor-piercing rounds, it achieved a muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second and could penetrate 112 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards. The numbers were comparable. The American 90mm was slightly superior in penetration, especially with HVAP rounds. But more importantly, it was competitive. This wasn't the Sherman 75mm gun that bounced off German heavy armor. This was a legitimate tank killer. German intelligence had access to some of this information. Captured ammunition could be analyzed. Battlefield reports could be compiled. But the analysis never reached the right conclusions. Or if it did, it never reached the Panzer crews who needed it most. The German Panzer superiority complex was so ingrained that contradictory evidence was dismissed or ignored. American tanks were inferior. That was doctrine. That was experience. Why would this new tank be any different? This institutional arrogance, this failure to adapt intelligence to battlefield reality, would cost German armor dearly. The technical specifications alone should have prompted urgent warnings to Panzer units. New American heavy tank, 90mm main gun, capable of frontal penetration of all German armor at combat ranges. Do not engage at distance. Do not assume armor superiority. Treat as peer threat. That warning never came. Instead, Tiger and Panther crews continued operating under the assumption that American tanks were easy prey, that their armor would protect them, that they could engage at will and expect victory. That fatal ignorance was about to be shattered by combat reality. The M26 Pershing entered combat in February 1945. 20 Pershings were shipped to Europe, arriving just as Allied forces pushed into Germany. They were distributed among the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions. The crews were experienced Sherman veterans, hastily trained on the new vehicle. They knew its capabilities on paper. They understood the gun was powerful, but they'd heard promises before. The 76mm Sherman was supposed to be competitive with German armor, and that hadn't panned out. So there was skepticism, hope, but also caution. The first significant engagement came on February 26, 1945, at Elldorf, Germany. A Pershing from the 3rd Armored Division, commanded by Sergeant Nicholas Maschlenik, encountered a Tiger I at close range in an urban environment. The Tiger crew likely saw the unfamiliar American tank and prepared to engage. They'd killed dozens of Shermans. This would be no different. Maschlenik's gunner, Corporal John Grimball, fired first. The 90mm HVAP round covered the distance in a fraction of a second. The tungsten penetrator punched through the Tiger's frontal armor, penetrated the fighting compartment, and detonated the ammunition stowage. The Tiger exploded. The American crew was stunned. They'd just achieved a frontal kill on a Tiger I, something Sherman crews rarely accomplished even with perfect shots. The 90mm had performed exactly as promised. Word spread quickly through American armored units. The new gun works, it really works. But more importantly, word didn't spread through German units. The Tiger crew was dead. There were few witnesses. German intelligence didn't immediately understand what had happened. Reports of a new American heavy tank were filed, but the implications weren't grasped. The pattern would repeat over the following weeks. March 6, 1945, Cologne. A Pershing commanded by Sergeant Bob Early engaged a Panther tank in a duel that would be captured on film by a combat cameraman. The footage still exists. Grainy, black and white, but dramatic. The Panther appears from behind a building, spots the Pershing and fires. The round strikes the Pershing's frontal armor and ricochets off. The Pershing's armor, 4 inches thick on the glacis, holds. The Pershing returns fire. The 90mm round penetrates the Panther's frontal armor. The Panther backs up, damaged but mobile. The Pershing fires again. The second round penetrates the turret. The Panther stops, smoke pouring from hatches. The crew bails out. The engagement lasts less than a minute. The Pershing wins decisively. This footage would become one of the most famous tank versus tank duels of the war. But in March 1945, it was just another combat report. For American commanders, it was validation. For German intelligence, it should have been a wake-up call. It wasn't. More engagements followed. A Pershing from the 9th Armored Division knocked out 2 Panthers in a single engagement near Remagen. Another destroyed a Tiger II at long range, a kill that should have been impossible for an American tank based on previous experience. The combat reports began piling up. The Pershing wasn't just surviving encounters with German heavy armor, it was winning them, frontally, at ranges that would have been suicidal for a Sherman. American tankers' confidence soared. Finally, they had a tank that could fight German armor on equal terms. They didn't need to sacrifice 4 tanks to kill 1 Tiger. They could engage directly, frontally, and win. But German tankers were still operating under old assumptions. Many Tiger and Panther crews had never even heard of the Pershing. Those who had encountered it and survived often didn't file detailed reports, either because they were retreating rapidly or because they didn't want to admit they'd been outfought by an American tank. The intelligence failure was compounding. Each engagement should have prompted urgent warnings. Instead, most Panzer crews remained unaware that the battlefield had fundamentally changed. The myth of German armored superiority was crumbling. But the myth was dying faster than the awareness of its death was spreading. By late March 1945, word was starting to spread through German armored units. A new American heavy tank was in the field, and it was dangerous. But the response wasn't uniform. Some units took the threat seriously. Others dismissed it as rumors or Allied propaganda. The Panzer superiority complex was deeply ingrained after years of dominating Allied armor. Consider the perspective of a veteran Tiger commander in March 1945. He's survived years of combat. He's destroyed dozens of enemy tanks, British Cromwells, American Shermans, Soviet T-34s. His Tiger has been hit multiple times and the armor held. He's learned to be confident, even aggressive in engagements. Now he's hearing rumors about a new American tank. But rumors have circulated before. The Sherman was supposed to be improved multiple times. The 76mm gun was supposed to be competitive. It wasn't. Why would this be different? This psychological framework, built on years of experience and reinforced by doctrine, made it difficult for German tankers to adapt to the new reality. Some learned, others died before they could. An account from a German Panther commander captured in April 1945 is revealing. During interrogation, he described encountering a Pershing near the Ruhr pocket. His initial assessment was that it was just another Sherman variant. He maneuvered for a flank shot, standard doctrine when facing American armor. But the Pershing didn't maneuver away like Shermans typically did. It turned to face him directly. This should have been suicide for an American tank. A frontal engagement with a Panther was exactly what Sherman crews avoided. The Pershing fired first. The round penetrated his Panther's frontal armor. His tank was disabled but didn't explode. His crew bailed out. As they retreated, he looked back at the American tank, realizing for the first time that it wasn't a Sherman. "We were told American tanks were weak," he said during interrogation. "No one told us they had a heavy tank. No one told us the gun could penetrate frontally. If we had known, we would have fought differently." That last sentence is crucial. If we had known, we would have fought differently. Knowledge affects tactics. Tactics affect survival. The intelligence failure didn't just cost German tankers their lives, it cost them the opportunity to adapt and fight effectively. By April 1945, some German units were adapting. Reports circulated describing the Pershing as a heavy tank with powerful gun. Do not engage frontally unless necessary. Some commanders ordered their crews to treat Pershings with the same caution they'd reserve for Soviet EIS-2 heavy tanks. But by April 1945, it was too late. Germany was collapsing, fuel was critically short, ammunition was scarce. Many Panzer units were down to a handful of operational tanks. The Pershing's impact was less about shifting the strategic balance. Germany was already losing, and more about correcting the tactical imbalance that had existed since 1942. The psychological impact extended beyond individual engagements. The myth of Tiger invincibility was central to German armored doctrine and morale. Tigers were supposed to be the apex predators of the battlefield. Crews were elite, training was extensive. Losses were supposed to be rare. The Pershing shattered that myth. American tankers could now kill Tigers frontally at combat ranges. The playing field had leveled. German armor was no longer invincible, and German tankers knew it. For the Americans, the psychological impact was equally significant, but opposite in direction. After years of being outgunned, after years of dying in Shermans that couldn't compete with German heavy armor, they finally had a tank that could fight on equal terms. Morale soared, confidence increased. Tankers who'd been cautious, even fearful, of encountering Tigers or Panthers now felt capable of engaging them directly. One American Pershing commander described the feeling simply, "For the first time, I didn't feel like I was driving a coffin." Let's return to that engagement in Cologne on March 6, 1945, because the captured footage and subsequent analysis reveal crucial details about why the Pershing succeeded and why German tankers were caught off guard. Sergeant Bob Early's Pershing, nicknamed Eagle 7, was advancing through rubble-strewn streets near the Cologne Cathedral. The 3rd Armored Division was pushing through the city, encountering sporadic resistance. Suddenly, a Panther tank emerged from behind a building approximately 150 yards away. Close range for a tank engagement. Deadly range. The Panther fired first, a crucial advantage in tank combat. The round, likely an APC-BC projectile, struck the Pershing's glacis plate. This is the moment that defines the engagement. The round ricocheted. The Pershing's armor, 4 inches of rolled homogeneous armor at 46 degrees angle, provided effective protection equivalent to about 6 inches of vertical armor. The Panther's gun, firing at that range and angle, couldn't penetrate. This shocked the Panther crew. German intelligence had reported American armor as weak. The Sherman's armor was easily penetrated. Even the upgraded models with additional plates rarely withstood German guns at close range. But the Pershing wasn't a Sherman. Its armor was specifically designed to resist German anti-tank guns, including the 88mm. In the seconds after the Panther's round ricocheted, the tactical situation reversed. The Panther crew likely experienced a moment of confusion and fear. Their shot had failed. They'd revealed their position. The American tank was still operational and now aiming at them. The Pershing fired. The 90mm round covered 150 yards in a fraction of a second. At that range, against the Panther's frontal armor, penetration was virtually guaranteed. The round punched through the Panther's lower glacis plate, a known weak point but still protected by 80mm of armor. The penetrator entered the fighting compartment, likely killing or wounding crew members and damaging critical systems. The Panther's driver attempted to reverse, backing the damaged tank away from the engagement. Smart tactics, disengage, assess damage, reposition, but Early's gunner was already tracking the movement. The second shot struck the Panther's turret. Penetration again. This round likely detonated ammunition or critically damaged the turret ring. Smoke poured from the hatches. The crew bailed out, abandoning the burning tank. Start to finish, less than 60 seconds. The combat cameraman captured the entire sequence. The footage was analyzed extensively by both American and German post-war researchers. Several observations emerged. First, the Panther crew fought correctly according to their training. They achieved surprise, fired first, and attempted to disengage when damaged. They did nothing wrong tactically. Second, the Panther's gun was capable of penetrating the Pershing, just not at the angle and range of that particular shot. A side or rear hit would likely have been fatal to the Pershing. Third, the Pershing's advantage was twofold: armor that could resist the Panther's frontal shot at that range, and a gun capable of reliably penetrating the Panther frontally. The engagement was a perfect demonstration of why the Pershing was revolutionary for American armor doctrine. It could absorb a hit and return fire effectively. Sherman crews couldn't rely on that. They had to avoid being hit at all. The Cologne duel became famous precisely because it encapsulated the shift in armored warfare dynamics on the Western Front. American armor was no longer automatically outmatched. The M26 Pershing arrived too late to fundamentally change the outcome of World War II. Only 20 Pershings saw combat in Europe before Germany's surrender. The war was already won through other means: air superiority, industrial capacity, manpower, logistics. But the Pershing's impact transcended its limited deployment numbers. It validated American tank development philosophy. For years, American armor design had been criticized as inadequate. The Sherman was too lightly armored and undergunned. American doctrine, quality through quantity, meant accepting higher casualties. The Pershing proved American industry could produce a world-class heavy tank when the need was recognized and resources were committed. The 90mm gun proved American ordnance design was competitive with the best German weapons. Post-war, the lessons influenced tank development for decades. The M26 became the basis for the M46 pattern, which saw extensive combat in Korea. The 90mm gun remained the standard American tank gun through the early 1950s. The design philosophy, combining adequate armor protection with a powerful main gun and good mobility, became the template for American tank development through the Cold War. But the more important lesson was about intelligence and adaptation. German armored forces failed to adapt to the Pershing's capabilities because intelligence systems failed to communicate the threat effectively. Institutional arrogance, the belief in inherent German technological superiority, prevented proper assessment of the new American tank. This failure wasn't unique to the Germans. Every military struggles with institutional inertia and the tendency to fight the last war rather than the current one. The lesson applies universally: underestimate your opponent's capabilities at your peril. Consider how the story might have been different if German intelligence had properly assessed the Pershing in early 1945. Suppose urgent warnings had gone out to all Panzer units. New American heavy tank, designation M26, 90mm main gun capable of frontal penetration of all German armor. 4-inch frontal armor resistant to 88mm at typical combat ranges. Do not engage at distance. Prioritize side and rear shots. Treat as peer threat. Would it have changed tactical outcomes? Absolutely. German crews would have approached engagements with Pershings more cautiously. They would have used terrain and maneuver to seek advantageous angles. They would have avoided the kind of frontal engagement that destroyed the Tiger at Elldorf. Would it have changed strategic outcomes? Number. By February 1945, Germany was losing for reasons far beyond tank versus tank engagements. But it might have saved German lives and destroyed more Allied armor. The failure to properly assess and respond to the Pershing threat was a failure of military intelligence and institutional adaptation. It's a lesson studied in military academies to this day. The story of the Pershing's 90mm gun is ultimately a story about assumptions and adaptation. German tankers assumed American armor would remain inferior. They assumed their technological advantage would persist. They assumed their experience and doctrine would continue to give them battlefield superiority. Those assumptions cost lives. The Tiger commander at Elldorf assumed the unfamiliar American tank was just another target. He died before learning otherwise. The Panther crew at Cologne assumed their first shot would disable or destroy the American tank. It didn't, and they lost their vehicle. Across dozens of engagements in early 1945, German armored crews paid the price for institutional failure to recognize and adapt to a changing battlefield reality. For American tankers, the Pershing represented vindication. After years of fighting in inadequate vehicles, after years of losses that shouldn't have happened, they finally had a tank that could compete with the best German armor. The 90mm gun gave them that capability. It could penetrate Tiger armor frontally. It could kill Panthers at combat ranges. It gave American crews a fighting chance in engagements that would have been suicidal in a Sherman. But the larger lesson transcends World War II tank battles. Military effectiveness requires accurate intelligence, honest assessment of both your own capabilities and your enemies, and the ability to adapt doctrine and tactics to changing realities. The Germans failed that test in early 1945. Their institutional arrogance and intelligence failures created a deadly knowledge gap. Their tankers fought bravely and skillfully, but they fought without crucial information about the threats they faced. The result was predictable: tactical defeats, lost vehicles, dead crews. War is ultimately about information as much as firepower. The side that better understands the battlefield, the weapons, the tactics, the capabilities, holds a critical advantage. The Pershing's 90mm gun was a formidable weapon, but the German tanker's ignorance of its capabilities was the real killer. In war, what you don't know absolutely can kill you. The Tiger tankers who underestimated the Pershing learned that lesson too late. The question for military professionals today is the same question German commanders should have asked in early 1945. Are we accurately assessing our adversary's capabilities, or are we making assumptions based on past experience that no longer applies? That question might determine who lives and who dies in the next conflict, just as it did in February and March of 1945, when American Pershings met German Tigers, and the myth of invincibility shattered under the impact of 90mm armor-piercing rounds.